Hello and welcome to another episode of the series Episódio Independente. My name is Arthur, and today I have the pleasure and the privilege to have here with us Lucy Cole. Lucy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Lucy, what are some of the things that we talked about during this conversation?
So we talked about my experience, my background a little bit, and then we went on to discuss different methodologies, as well as the relationship between teacher and student and the importance of that. And then we went on to talk a little bit about the business aspect and the importance of, being organized, the benefits of having set courses, and thinking about, quality over quantity. So how slow growth can be a lot more beneficial in the long run.
It was a very nice conversation, so let's go. Lucy, thank you for joining me.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Why don't you start telling us a little bit about your trajectory?
So I suppose, like many others, teaching wasn't the first thought in my mind when it came to a career. I actually studied economics. So I have a degree in economics. And then I started my master's in health economics and then ended up in Brazil. Life happened. And that's when I started teaching because I thought it would be easy. As, a lot of people do. Like, I said my language. Yeah, it'll be easy. It's just a bit of English. I was wrong. Definitely wrong. I mean, before that, I'd done TEFL courses because I traveled a lot and I did volunteering and things like that. So we taught in China for a couple of weeks. That was cool. And in Jordan, we transformed a school in Jordan and then taught them their first ever music lesson, which was nice. So I'd done like bits and bobs, but I'd never done it as a career per se. So when I got into the classroom, I was quite awful, actually. I wasn't very good. I didn't really know what I was doing. Like I could speak English, but I mean, there's so much more to teaching than just being able to speak English. So at that point,
did you recognize that at the time? I mean, I'm not saying I agree with the fact that you were awful, but like when you say it like today, did you like see it at the time? Like, oh, that was a bad class or something like that? Or do you see it now after?
No, I saw it. I think because the school, I think they got quite excited when I was like, oh, I want to teach. It's like, oh, she's from England. You know how it is, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, come and do the training course. And I think their idea was that they would give me quite a lot of groups. And I ended up with 2, I think, because they realized I wasn't very good.
Okay.
So it was that kind of thing of like, they knew I wasn't that great. I knew I wasn't that great. But then I was very determined to be great. And I think it was a lack of confidence. That first time you go into a classroom and you've got like a bunch of 12-year-olds staring at you.
Yeah, you started teaching teenagers.
Yeah. They were a lovely class, that class.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a different country. The culture's completely different. I wasn't completely familiar with the culture. And, following a lesson plan and things like this. And so I think a lot of it was confidence as opposed to being a bad teacher.
Was it your experience in China?
So, yeah, I had some experience in China.
No, this first one, like the first one you had was in China?
No, here. When I started teaching, when I started properly teaching, not just voluntarily, as a job, it was here in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't so much that I was not very good at teaching. I just didn't really know, what I was doing. And I'm someone that likes to do everything by the book.
Okay.
So I was there like looking at my really detailed lesson plan, trying to do exactly what I'd written down and things like that. So it was a little bit of an awkward experience, but I don't know anyone who had a fantastic experience when they first started teaching.
I really don't think that ever happened with anyone,
But yeah, and then after that, I was determined to get better and better and better, and that's what I've done every day since, I guess. So I took the CELTA course, I took the Delta course, and I've just been working hard to constantly improve, constantly develop, right?
Yeah. Yeah. In addition to the CELTA and the Delta, did you take any other qualification?
Train the Trainer I took as well, and then other courses here and there, but those are the three main ones. I did the Delta in, I think it was just a little short of 8 months. I did all 3 modules at the same time, which I would not recommend at all. I mean, the CELTA is painful enough, but trying to do the Delta in a short period of time is torture, I would say.
Is it one of those intensive modules, like intensive courses?
Yeah, it was just a case of doing all 3 at once instead of one at a time. So instead of just focusing on one of the modules, you just do all 3.
You
so
really
the program
wanted to do
program where they work it so that you end up doing all 3. I cried a lot that year.
I can imagine. It's like just thinking about it sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And you did it in Brazil.
I did it with International House in London. So I did it online. It was quite an experience. And the reason I wouldn't recommend doing it like that is because you learn so much. It's so much. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and it just keeps going on and on. So you really need that time to digest the information, reflect on everything,
sink in,
which is quite hard to do when you're doing it in such a short period of time.
Absolutely.
So between that time, I don't quite know when it was, if I'm honest, but at some point I started teaching teachers. Because teachers came to me and they said, "Can you teach me?" And I was like, "All right, why not?" And I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's the most challenging when it comes to ELT teaching. I think beginners are the hardest. I think you need so much patience, so much creativity. I think it's a really hard level to teach. But yeah, I love teaching teachers because there's always a challenge. I'm always kept on my toes.
Yeah.
And I think it really, there's something special about teaching teachers, watching their confidence improve, because you know how it is, when you start teaching, you think about the language a lot. You think about, oh my God, am I getting it wrong? Things like that. And then you watch someone's confidence grow, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful process.
Yeah.
So that's why, that's where I am now, teaching teachers.
And I think not only that, but also the fact that you kind of know that you're being observed in also a pedagogical level, if I can look at it this way, like they're not only picking up on the language that you're using, but also they're picking up on your classroom management strategies and your, the sequencing of a lesson and how you present introductions that teaches. And if you're talking, I think you're talking mostly about teachers of English, right? Of English as a second or foreign language. Yeah. So I think at least when I was doing a course with you, I was also picking up on those things, like how you carry out the lessons and how you like organize the slides and present information and stuff like that. So
yeah, and teachers love it when something goes wrong, because then they're like, oh my God, this person's human too. That's brilliant.
It happens to the best of us,
Especially if I get something wrong, like when it comes to language. Teachers love it, really love it. So,
yeah, no,
brings a smile.
And it's just another way of showing that, like, we make mistakes, and move on from there, And all right, so how long would you say you've been exclusively working? I mean, I don't know if exclusively. Are you connected to any institutions? The present?
No, I have been doing some work for 7. I've been teaching it for 7, but I'm not. I'm connected just to Lucical English.
Okay. So you're hired as kind of like an outsourced contractor for
yeah, for others. Yeah.
All right. So you've been working as predominantly as a self-employed teacher for how long?
Well, I was doing a little bit on the side when I was working in school. So, it's a tough one. Maybe since I started the business, maybe about 6 years, like actually started my own business.
Let's talk a little bit about the lessons you learned along the way. First of all, looking at the pedagogical aspect of your lessons. I would imagine from the beginning, when you started teaching and when you started teaching independently, like as a self-employed professional, until nowadays, your classes changed. Like, what kinds of strategies did you implement in your classes that you found that were like very useful, very interesting, that you would consider some of the best decisions, pedagogically speaking, that you've made in your classes?
I would say that, through experience, your teaching changes and it adapts. So there were strategies, for example, that I would use exclusively when I started teaching, and approaches that I wouldn't do now. So, for example, let's go back to classic PPP approach, right? Presentation, practice, production. That's the first approach you learn as a new teacher. And I am not against this approach. I know a lot of people are, but I think as a novice, it's fantastic. So when I started teaching, everything was, everything had to be followed to the letter. I had a plan for everything, and it had to be exactly as it was on the plan. And if a student, didn't understand something or needed extra clarification, if it wasn't on the plan, it wasn't happening. So I think I was very rigid beforehand. Then I started introducing other approaches and things like that to my teaching as I learned, and so on and so forth. But I think today, if I reflect on myself at the beginning and think about myself now, these days I don't follow one particular approach. And this is something that kind of irritates me a lot when you look at social media and things like that. People are like, this is the new approach. This is the latest approach, or I've invented a new approach or something like this to teaching, and that we should only teach a certain way. And I think what I've learned is that we shouldn't. So, for example, I'm a big fan of principled eclecticism, because what is it? It's, okay, I've learned a lot about different approaches, so I'm going to pick and choose from what I've learned in order to best cater to my student. So I think as we grow as teachers, we need to develop our skills. We need to learn, we need to adapt, and we need to try a lot of things. And I'd say over the years, what I've learned is that it's not a case of just following one direction. It's a case of looking at everything in a broad perspective and thinking, what's best for my student? What is going to help them the best? And how can I, best achieve that? So I would say I'm a lot less rigid, and I'd say a good word to think about the way I approach things now is adaptability. We have to be able to adapt. We have to be able to adapt with the times, with technology, for example. ChatGPT, we've had to adapt. And we're going to have to continually adapt. So I think, that would be the word that I would use to describe the change from then until now.
Learning to... I think it's kind of like learning to be more sensitive to what the student is presenting, like it's giving us, and us responding to that need, and us responding to what the student is proposing.
Exactly.
There's a lot also about the way that students respond to certain approaches, right? Because not only about the subject matter, but also about the way that students respond to that. And it's very interesting to see, like, for instance, I know it's not a matter of approach that I'm going to comment here, but I had a student in the past, and he was very reluctant with the idea of using a course book. I don't want to use a course book. I don't want to, I don't want to just flip pages and stuff like that. And what I did was I kind of used the input from course books, but I presented it in a different way. And like I picked and chose some things here and there, present them in a different, using a different rationale behind it, or using a different sequence and stuff like that. So the way that shows to a student is also important to consider. Like, I hear you. I understand what you need. I understand what you're asking me to do here. So I know the assignment, and like, let's do this together. It's like, I think it's a way of actually showing that you are sensitive to what that person is bringing you, right?
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the student, right?
Yeah.
And it's having the confidence in yourself to be able to deliver that and not listen to other people telling you what you should be doing. Having that belief, okay, I know my student best. I always say to teachers, when I'm training, you know your student best. I don't know your student.
Yeah.
So what, the type of approach or strategy you should use for your student. Other people can help you with ideas, but you have to believe in yourself, and you have to believe in your way and your approach. Students wouldn't be coming to you if they hadn't heard about you from somewhere.
Yeah.
And they weren't attracted to something about you as a teacher, because there are so many teachers to choose from. So I think, that should be the focus. I think a lot of the time we're all blessed with imposter syndrome, right? We're all blessed with a lack of confidence in some aspect. Even the most qualified, the most famous ELT teachers out there, they have a lack of confidence in some aspect of their teaching. And so, we can forget that actually we have that power, and we have that ability to teach the students well from our own accord, and not from just doing what someone else is doing.
What other approaches, in addition to the traditional PPP approaches, present, practice, production, right? Like in addition to the PPP, like what other approaches do you see yourself using regularly, if I may put it this way?
Well, I think I use a little bit of everything. So one approach, that I guess should be discussed is dogme, right? I like dogme. I like what it stands for, but I like dogme moments in my classes. Okay. I like the reflective moments. Why? Because by nature, I'm a little bit of a control freak, some might say. So I'm not someone who always likes to just walk into a lesson. I like to think about it. I like to make strategies. I like slides. I don't think there's anything wrong with slides. But I do understand the need to not always follow the plan, and to also, use what you have in the classroom. So I like to bring a little bit of dogme into my classes, but although on the odd occasion I do full dogme, I'm not a continual dogme user in that respect. Even things like translation, I'm not against anymore. I used to be very anti-Portuguese in the class, but I actually see that it can be quite beneficial at times, and it can be very helpful to help students understand, to learn. Again, not something I would use continuously, but I'm not against it. I'm not against it.
Translation, especially talking about lower level students, and it's quite useful at some points. And I had that thing with the translation that like I should be avoiding it as much as possible. And I was thinking like that maybe translation shouldn't be the end of it. Like it should be something that supports the learning process, but not the end of it, right? Like not the direct notion of translating something. Yeah.
It also depends on how someone's mind works. I have although I teach teachers, I take on a few other students, because I like to challenge myself. So I said, I don't like teaching beginners, so I'll take on a beginner, because I think it's important, especially if we're going to teach teachers, we need to be practicing. It's not all about the theory aspect. So I currently have a B2 student, and he translates structures sometimes, but he does it because that's how his mind works. And once he's done it, he's like, okay, I get it. And then he goes straight back to English again. So he has this need for a little bit of translation at times so that he can kind of, figure it all out in his mind as well.
Yeah. And I would imagine that happens to you as well when you because you learned Portuguese as a second language, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would eventually have to slip into English and then move back to Portuguese. I don't know if that's something that also happens with you.
All the time. Sometimes I'm in class and the word will come to me in Portuguese and I just can't think in English. And so, sometimes I have to say to the students, what is this word in English? And then they'll tell me, brilliant, it works.
Is there anything else that you would also add to this list of things that you do in your classes?
I guess when I first started teaching, I remember my boss asked the coordinator, "Oh, what do you think of her teaching? Do you think she's a little bit too serious?" Because
Talking about you?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I'm very British in my mannerisms and my approaches, and I wanted to do a perfect job. So when I wanted to do a perfect job, I came across as very, serious and not. I mean, I don't have a very smiley face anyway,
Okay.
but quite stern, which I think is very.
And that was here in Brazil. Oh, it was here. Okay.
First school in Brazil, and I find it quite funny now because I'm not like that when I'm teaching. I have a completely different approach. So I guess over the years, what I've learned to how to relax yourself as a teacher, I suppose. And now that I teach teachers, it's a little bit different as well. But I think we're more than teachers these days. Sometimes we're therapists. Sometimes we're, friends. Sometimes some people come to classes just to have someone to talk to, but in a different language.
Yeah.
And sometimes, most all of the time we're there to teach, but we have different roles as teachers. And I think I've learned how to adapt based on what my student needs, because a relationship with a student, when you're an independent teacher, okay, not thinking about working at a school now, you have to have some authority, you have to be professional, but at the same time to be able to keep those students for the long term, you have to be a little bit more, you have to give a little bit extra, you have to open yourself a little bit more and form relationships with students. I think, which is something that I wouldn't have perhaps done before. I would have.
And what is something that you do that helps to create this bond, like to establish these bonds with students?
I listen to them and what they need. So if my student tells me they need something, then I'll adapt what I was going to do to cater to that need. If my student's struggling with something, I'll give them extra work. If my student's like, I saw this the other day and I really want to go over it, let's go over it. Listening to your student, that's all they want. Mm-hmm. It's not talking at them, it's developing with them and helping them to reach that development they want. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones paying us. So we have to be able to gauge their needs, understand what they want, and help them with that. Mm-hmm. You want them to feel comfortable enough to come to you and say, I'm really struggling with this. And feel that they can come to you and that you will help them with that. Yeah. And then it's not class is over. Sorry, I'm not going to help you anymore.
See you as a person they can reach out for help and not someone they have to fear or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Because I think that's what people are looking for, especially online. Being online is a lonely place.
Yeah.
So we don't want that level of formality that perhaps we have in classrooms or other places. People need a little bit more TLC, perhaps.
What would that be?
tender loving care, a little
Okay.
bit extra,
And it makes perfect sense because I think this semester it also happened, but in the past, I remember one of the semesters I was teaching, I had about, like, it was the semester I had the largest number of seniors in my, whole of students, like the whole group of students that I had. They were all having classes like either individually or in pairs or in trios, but in general, looking at all my students, that was a semester that I had a lot of seniors having classes. When I mean seniors, like 60 plus, like 60-year-old plus. And something that was quite interesting that was happening is that I noticed that they were having classes because they wanted to keep active, not because they were planning a trip, not because they had like to present a paper at a conference, not because they had to write an article or they had to participate in a meeting or anything. No, they just wanted to stay active. They just wanted to talk about different stuff and have a conversation with other people and things like that. And these were people who their children, adult children, recently left their homes, to go to university, or they were feeling like a bit isolated for whatever reason. Yeah, so I agree very much with what you're saying, because sometimes we just think we have this. I have the word in Portuguese in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you have this utilitarian view of English that you have to be using it for something. And like I'm gonna get out of this class and I'm gonna implement this knowledge that I have in my in my meetings or in my something like that. Okay, yeah, that can happen, and we hope that happens. But sometimes that person just needs some stimulation, something for them to think about and to talk about and someone to interact with, right?
Exactly, and it made me think about a time I was teaching advanced class and my student cried. He was in his 60s. He cried at the after my first class because he said he couldn't understand me.
Wow.
And he was about to move to Canada as well, and he was just so upset. He was like, "I'm going to have to cancel the course," and I was like, "No, don't." Don't cancel. Stick with me. We can do this. And I had to be there, and I had to be this emotional support. Because if I hadn't done that, he would have quit the course, felt like a failure, and probably stopped studying English. And he needed English. So we have to be very careful by the way that, we interact with students, because we can be the difference between them having the confidence to continue and keep going or giving up.
Yeah.
Even when it's something that they really need for a specific purpose. So I think we have quite a huge role when it comes to being more than.
When they give up, we actually, a lot of times we lose touch with that student. And when they give up, it's usually not because they gave up to look for someone else. It's because they give up because they stopped believing in themselves. And they kind of, one more time, put the plan to develop their language on hold because they think they're not capable or something like that. And it's something that really affects their self-esteem a lot of times. Of course, sometimes it's just because they found another teacher and they wanted to have classes with someone else or whatever, and that's fine. Like if you want to try with different people or something, that's always going to happen. Like you will always be there will always be that person who looks for the same type of service that you're offering like elsewhere, and that's okay. I mean, it happens. But I think it's a big red flag when we have to be alert for those types of situations that, oh my gosh, this person is going to drop out of the course and that person's going to put their dreams on hold for how long now?
Exactly.
So what's going to happen? Yeah.
We have to be really perceptive. Sometimes after class, I can see someone's quiet and I'll just send them a message. I noticed that you were quiet in class. Is everything okay? Is there anything I can do to help? Just a message like that. it can be really important for a student. So I think, we have to be a little bit flexible. We have to give a little bit more sometimes.
Let's have a conversation about some of the things you do as a business, like to organize your business and in administrative terms. What are some strategies that you use in your business that have proven to be very useful to you or successful in your case? Like, what have you done in terms of yourself as a business that has worked well for you?
So I think what works well these days is I have set courses. So whereas before I had a lot of just private one-on-one students, I now create courses, and I have set courses that run for 16 weeks each semester, and then intensive courses in January. I think that's really useful because that way you have a set schedule. And I think one of the hardest things about being a teacherpreneur is that, we have, there's no set schedule. And it's like, okay, when do I take holiday? How am I going to get my money? It gets to December, January, no one has any money because students have gone off and they're living their best life. And then you're left with no money coming in and waiting for more students to come. And I've had occasions where I've been, struggling financially because of this aspect. So what do I do now? I create courses. When one course is finishing, people start paying for the next course. So I think organizing your finances, organizing how you're going to get money coming in is a huge, huge aspect of being able to have your own business, as an online teacher, as an independent teacher. Because if you don't do that, you'll find that some months you struggle, some months you don't. And then that brings extra stress into everything else that you have to do, because you have to be the marketing expert, you have to do the admin, you have to teach. The list goes on. It's endless. So being able to organize, your semesters and also your finances, I think is a huge, huge weight lifted off your shoulders.
When do you have a vacation?
Well,
does that ever happen?
So I should have vacation in July, but for the last couple of years, I've gone to England to work as a director of studies in a summer school. So it's kind of holiday, but it's not holiday. Holiday from the business, but a different type of work.
Not for Lucy.
Yeah. But then I do combine it with seeing my family and things like that. But I do have holidays at Christmas time.
And that's about what, like 2 weeks or something?
About 2 weeks, yeah. And in July, about 2 weeks as well. July, August, I find 2 weeks. So I don't personally take a lot of holiday, but that's just a me problem, that's me. Because I like to go and work in England. I enjoy it. So I enjoy the summer schools. So for me, it is kind of like a vacation.
You mentioned the 16-week courses that you offer, and I imagine like you have like different types of courses that you offer there. You usually offer courses that classes take place once a week. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Like your semester courses, the classes take place once a week. Yeah. And all of them start at the same time, or they start like relatively close to each other, or like do you have this thing that you like offer courses and then after one course another one starts like in the same semester? How does that work?
No, so to make my life easier, I start them all at the same time. They all start at the same time, they all finish. The only thing that changes is if there's a holiday, which there always is in Brazil. Yeah. So something I didn't used to do, I now take holidays off. So when I put the course schedules, holidays are accounted for. So some courses might last longer than others purely because of holidays. So yeah, I start them at the same time, I finish them at the same time. Anything to make life a little bit easier, because I found it quite difficult, especially when you launch a course in the middle of the year, for example, and then you've got a lot of other stuff going on. So I find this way, it takes a little bit of the stress away.
Yeah. It's very hard to focus on like new prospect students when everything is already like full blow, like going, and
Exactly.
you kind of have to reshift your attention. Now I have to like pay attention to this other course that's starting. I have to maybe eventually interview students, because you work with groups, and some of our audience like work like one-to-one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of teachers that are trying to transition from one-on-one to group, and are really struggling with how to do that, right?
Yeah.
And I think by having these set courses, you might find that in some courses you end up with 2 students. That's okay. Do it. Okay, you'll get slightly less money at the beginning, but as your reputation grows, and as you know, as you progress, you'll find that more and more students come, because it's people think that you have to get, you have to get students quickly, but it's not about getting students quickly. It's about being able to retain them in the long term.
Yeah.
So, by slowly doing it, start with a group of 2. If you can attract 2 people, fantastic. That will grow to 3, then it will grow to 4. And then you'll find that you're able to do it. Some groups might close because they might not work. That's fine. That also happens. It's the same when you do a workshop.
Yeah. At first, it's really frustrating. But as we learn to, go through that frustration process, you learn that it's the way to go. I remember the first academic writing workshop, like short course that I offered, was I had like 1 person, and I said, I'm gonna do it. And then the second one there were like 4, and then the third one I had like 8 people in it. It's all about that. It's all about like adjusting your marketing strategies and getting traction, right? Like getting people to recommend your course and stuff.
Yeah, you've just got to commit. You've got to realize that having your own business, you're going to fail. I know we don't like the word fail, but you're going to have some bumps along the way. I hired a marketing team once. What a waste of money. It was the biggest waste of money. They didn't help at all. I really regretted it, but I learned from it. I had this need when I first started to try and grow quickly. I thought, having lots of followers would enable me to get more clients. And that's not the way it works. You could have 100,000 followers and 2 people buy your course.
Yeah.
You don't have the qualified people. So I had this idea that marketing was the most important thing. But we have to realize it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. It's your students first. It's the quality of your teaching to your students, and the rest comes. If you don't have time to post on Instagram that day, what's more important? Preparing a great class or posting on Instagram? We have to prioritize, and we have to realize that clients come over time. As your reputation grows, people come to you. And, whether that's by word of mouth, whether that's through social media, whichever way it is, they will come. But if you try and do everything, I know quite a few people whose businesses have failed because all they focus on is the growth of the business, and the quality side was non-existent. So they got all these clients, and then their reputation went,
Yeah, so you kind of, there's more people to disappoint in that.
Yeah,
the number of people you're letting down is much higher than,
because you can't manage it. When you grow so quickly, you have to be able to manage that growth. And if you can't, it's going to reflect badly on you. If you can't give the clients what you're promising them, you're gonna have a lot of problems there.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing I would say I've learned. Slow growth. Slow and steady wins the race, as they say. And being organized, being able to organize your semesters and your finances and things like that.
Yeah. Thinking about, if I may just add something, thinking about like independent teachers and like teachers who work mostly one-to-one with students. I would also consider it important for them to have a clear idea of how many spots they have to, like they need to have filled during the semester for the year to work, for them to be able to work comfortably. So they don't have to, like, they don't panic if something happens to a student and they need to like drop out of the course halfway through, and you have to like rush to get another student to replace them. Like having a clear idea of how many people you actually need, how many positions, like how many places you actually need to fill to make your semester and your year work financially and comfortably. It sounds to me like an important something for teachers to consider as well, like having so how much you need for the year and not only for the month, first of all, right? You know how much you need for that year.
Just because you have like one student doesn't mean you can't have some kind of course for that one student per se. So you have like a bundle of classes, or you create a syllabus for that one student.
And maybe that's even a great learning experience in terms of how to design curricula, right? Like you learn to design the curriculum working with one student, and think about that student as a group and learn to design that curriculum for that student, and then you can try to implement it with a group later or something.
Exactly. I just think that something that we don't always realize when we start these businesses is how hard you do have to work. And people think that those who are successful have it easy, and that they got successful overnight, but they didn't. They put in a lot of work. And I think, we have to realize that it's not something that's going to come to us with, I'm just going to work 3 hours a day and then just have the rest of the day off. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to put in that work, put in that effort, have things that fail, that don't do very well, and grow from them and learn. You have to be ready for disappointment, because we're never going to get it all right at the beginning. I mean, it's possible, but I've not met anyone who's got it right at the beginning.
And I think it's also important to highlight that you need to actively plan breaks, right? Because if you don't, you just see yourself teaching 24/7, like teaching, like having like 10 classes in a day, and because you want to optimize your time and like the money that you're making with it from your classes, and having these planned breaks throughout the day and throughout the semester. Make sure you have a holiday. Sure. You have vacations.
That's the part of working hard. We think working hard is just doing the planning and the teaching, but actually it's working hard on getting that balance, because I think that's the hardest thing, being able to have that work-life balance. When you're at home, there's no 9 to 5, there are no hours. You could be working 24 hours a day if you can manage it. There's no one there to tell you, okay, work's over now. So I think, that's probably the toughest part because there are times, where we're able to balance, and there are other times where we're not able to balance. And I think finding that balance is very important. It's something that we should prioritize.
So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much, Lucy. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for
sharing. For the people who are listening to us and they want to know a little bit more about you and your work, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram. I am there. I'm also on LinkedIn, but I'm mainly on Instagram these days.
What's your handle?
Lucy Cole English.
Okay.
My name plus English.
It's going to be in the description to this video. And stay here with us. Remember to leave a like in your subscription and leave a comment here. Interact with us. Let's continue this conversation in the chat, in the comment section. And stay tuned for the next interviews to come. Thank you very much.